Okay, welcome back to another edition of the Free Arkansas podcast, where we take a look at unfiltered look at policies, people, and possibilities of the natural state. And today we're going to talk to Mike Poore about education. And what we're going to try to focus on today is where Arkansas sits in K through 12. What are some of the things that are going on that are hot topics in K through 12, and more importantly, how can Arkansas move up the rankings in K through 12? But first, let me introduce Mike. Mike is a former superintendent of Little Rock and the Bentonville school districts, and now an executive vice president at Education Partners. Mike, how you doing?
Wonderful. It's really I'm honored to be a part of your podcast today, and looking forward to the conversation.
Excellent. And you've been in education for, I think, almost 4 decades. Is that about right?
I'm a little over the 4-decade mark. Yeah. So I'm aging somewhat gracefully.
I'd like to think that's been a pretty interesting 40 years, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that have gone on.
It really has. You go from, like a No Child Left Behind that happened right about the time I became a principal, and those standards and accountability, and, to now where we're at, where, there's such an intense focus on literacy, post-secondary access. But it all boils down to, in my mind, you've got to have good people, and you've got to have systems in place to really try to perform and excel.
Excellent. Well, I want to ask you a bunch of questions, but first I want to introduce myself. I'm Andy McNeil. This is my co-host, Matt Duffield. Matt, how are you doing?
Yeah. Hey, Mike. Good to see you, man. And Andy's talked about you for weeks coming on the show. He got so excited he forgot to introduce his co-host today, Andy. I thought, man, I've got questions for Mike too. Thanks so much for coming on. I know you've been in education now in that field for 38 years, a long time, and that's been a hot topic on Free Arkansas. So thanks so much for coming on, and we look forward to picking your brain today and getting your thoughts and opinions to how we can help the state of Arkansas.
For those that can't see it, I'm actually also representing an Ozark United hat. That's the new, soccer team. I don't know when they're ever going to get it up in Northwest Arkansas, but I think they're moving that direction. And so that would be another feather in the cap of the folks in Northwest Arkansas. Well, let's just start here. Rankings aren't everything, but, I do know that when I've tried to move people into the Russellville area from other states as our company grew, one of the main things everybody looked at, probably the first thing they looked at was how good the school systems are. And when you look at the broader rankings like US News and World Report, overall Arkansas's education is 38th. I think K through 12 is 35th. Mike, you got a view on, is that important? Tell me how you think about that and why you think that is.
Well, first I'll put it in context that when I came into the state in 2011 and was going to become the superintendent of Bentonville, I believe the state ranked around 48th at that point. So, we're on the right direction, and there's a lot of credit that needs to go to Governor Hutchinson and Governor Sanders for the work that's been done to really tighten focus. And I think probably the primary thing that you'd say has caused that jump from up into the high 30s is the focus on literacy. And, the science of reading, it's kind of remarkable that, and we sometimes lose sight of this because we are stuck on saying 38, not good enough. And that's absolutely right. But on the other side, we were really one of the first states, believe it or not, Mississippi probably was the first state that went with science of reading. Arkansas was not far behind. There are states like Colorado, where I came from before I came to Arkansas. There's states up in New York region that just now are adopting the science of reading. And in some ways, for those that are listening, the science of reading, when you really boil down to it, it kind of goes back into old school delivery of being able to, use the sounds of words, breaking the words down into chunks so that not only are you able to decode words that you're learning as a first grader, but then you're able to decode words while you're in middle school and high school. That skill set is critical for long-term success. And again, both of our governors have done an amazing job in their own way. As you mentioned, Matt, The LEARNS Act has taken it to another level of support that goes towards districts. And Governor Hutchinson got that ball rolling, when he came into office.
Is the literacy, when you talk about that, is that just because there's a link between just how much you read? And I'm going to think there's a link. I think there's a link between how much you read and just how much, how much smarter you can become? Or is it just people couldn't read and we're trying to put in other strategies so that they can read?
Well, the other method before we got to the science of reading was, almost having kids memorize words and memorize, what they were seeing tied to the pictures of the book and so forth, to then start to come up with what the text was trying to share. And so this fundamental foundational skill set is really critical, and it's a huge step forward. It's going to pay dividends. I mean, this is just starting to pay dividends. I think there's going to be enhanced results coming from the efforts we're currently making. And I will give one other thing, though, because I'm sure that's why you asked me to be on here, is to think, okay, what else can we do?
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that we can do is start this even earlier. And I know that Matt has seen some of the legislation. There were a couple positive changes on early childhood education, but we can do more. And it's really one of those cool things, because early childhood education in the last 3 or 4 years, ever since the pandemic ended, it has become a nonpartisan issue, in my opinion anyway. Nonpartisan because conservatives want to get people back to work, and they're losing people to the workforce of families who can't find good early childhood options. That can be through the private schools, public schools, that could even be through daycare centers. But we can get so much better at that delivery, and we can even create some incentives that would work. Again, Mississippi's doing this type of thing right now already. It's a good model. We need to do more. We did do a couple things in this last legislative session that enhanced our delivery on early childhood, but that's really, the brain is wiring itself from those early stages, early years. And the more we can do to enhance that, and again, let's just take public education out of this. Public education cannot possibly right now do everything that I'm talking about, because there's just simply not the space. But working together, and I'm a big believer in that, in collaborating, and that can be with business units. When I was in Little Rock, we were trying to get the hospital, some of the other big industries down in the southeast part of the city to say, okay, let us open up our early childhood centers, have you partner with us. You can bring your kids in at 5:30 in the morning. It'll be a daycare during the first part of it, but then let's go into a structured pre-K type setting. And then if we need more daycare, we can do that later. Working together has some tremendous possibilities, but there's going to need to be some things that kind of support all ends of that.
So is this a technique that you then deploy at a certain age that a teacher has to be educated on? Or is this tell me how it gets, I think I've got the idea, but how does it get implemented?
It absolutely does need a very thoughtful implementation. And our state's done that right with training at the K through 3 level, and then it went K5, and then it just keeps on expanding out in terms of understanding the science of reading. But now that training has also been pushed down into the early childhood areas in any type of structured pre-K program. I think you could say that is happening. It's that there's a lot of unstructured pre-K, a lot of unstructured daycare centers that could really use that assistance and support, maybe a little bit higher set of standards that would move that forward. And training is the starting point. Okay,
so if I take my kid to a daycare that's pre-K daycare, and it's just playtime the entire time versus has an educational component where we introduce sort of a reading science, that we can get a jump start if we do that, so that by the time we do hit kindergarten or first grade or whatever, that we're not behind.
Absolutely. And I'm not trying to say that kids shouldn't be having fun.
I know you're not. Yeah.
Kids should need to be having fun really in every aspect of their education if we're doing it right. But at that early stage, there's still a whole bunch of things that they learn through socialization, but we can also help them with some of these foundational skills for being literate and being a good reader.
And did you put some of this in place in Bentonville or Little Rock?
Well, we probably were more successful, more thoughtful about it in Little Rock. In Bentonville, to be honest, we ran into kind of a problem in that we had space issues, and we had to we were really limited on the number of slots that were available for us to be able to serve the community. I think that's why again, if you think about this, what did the Walton family do? What did the Walmart group do? On their new campus, they've developed an early childhood learning center. Okay. Why can't that happen in Osceola?
Yeah.
Why can't that happen as we get ready to go expand down in Magnolia and El Dorado? Why can't that happen in Pine Bluff, where we're going to have natural gas go to liquid gas, and we're going to become one of the top 3 producers in the whole world? Okay, you look at what's going on in Fort Smith. So all these areas of our state, this could be a dynamic that I think really would help and support the business community, but it's going to have great impacts on that development of young people, so that they're really going to be able to be learners at 3rd grade, and then off they go throughout the rest of their education.
Matt, I'm curious, from your perspective at the State House, what are the things that were high on everybody's list this time, and what are you curious about related to literacy, or for quite frankly any other K through 12 topic?
Yeah, well, let's, if you will, Andy, I've got a list of things here I'd like to speak with Mike about. And, Mike, one thing, as us as elected officials, we hear from constituents about a variety of issues. And, one issue in regards to education, I think that at least in regards to the LEARNS Act, that we really heard different opinions on, and I know there was some misinformation about it, was the school choice and voucher programs. So could you maybe elaborate on that a little bit and give me your thoughts on voucher programs in the state of Arkansas and how that's going to be implemented and how that's been going?
Well, first I'll give you guys something to laugh at a little bit. Senator Hester used to always give me a bad time. And he goes, Poore, he goes, I don't know. He goes, when you're in Bentonville, everybody thought you were too doggone liberal. Now when you went to Little Rock, everybody thought you're too doggone conservative. So maybe I just have the right seasoning is what I'd like to say. That's what I used to tell him, of kind of a combination. But I think that choice is a good thing. So, and I may not be, have a whole bunch of other public school officials behind and supportive of that, but it needs to be smart in terms of the choices that we offer. And we need to have a variety of different things that kids can go towards to meet their learning needs. It's not uncommon, as you both know, to have families have kids in public, private, and charter schools all within the same family. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. On the voucher end of things, my caveat would be that I would love to see the accountability have some of the same areas, so that we really are using some of the same assessments, because it's going to either draw people more towards that concept, or it's going to make people say, whoa, these guys in the public school, you're not doing nearly as well as those that are in the private. And I just think those kind of things are good data points, and we shouldn't shy away from that.
Yeah. Yeah. We've had different people have different opinions on the vouchers for sure. Because most all of my friends in Little Rock that have their kids in private school essentially just now get a voucher back. They basically get a dollars that they then give to the private school. And I feel like those schools probably do have extremely high standards, but you could envision people that start schools that don't have high standards too.
Well, and the other thing that you want to do as you think about assessing and really the accountability then behind it is, what's the growth? Because that's really telling you whether or not you're on the right track, is growth in students. Are they making definitely a year's worth of growth? But of course, in education, we like to see kids make even more than 1 year's worth of growth. And so how do we monitor that? What tools do we use? Can we have more consistency in our state? I think that would be positive.
Yeah. Matt, what else?
Yeah, well, Mike, I was a public education guy. I was fortunate. I grew up here in Russellville and went to an elementary school called Center Valley Elementary. I think it was his second year it was open. So, I've been blessed to have good teachers. And so, I may not have had many choices of where to go, but I was certainly blessed. But I'm a big proponent of public schools, and I'm biased because that's what I went through, and I was certainly blessed. I guess on that note, in regards to the teachers, Mike, we definitely know we need quality teachers. I know when I was growing up, and I'm sure back in your generation, things were just different. Teachers' teaching styles were different. A lot of the people that taught were different. What's your thoughts on like the future of teachers in the state of Arkansas, kind of where we're at, how we continue to have quality teachers? In the LEARNS Act, we gave teachers a raise up to $50,000, which I thought was a good thing to help hopefully encourage more people to pursue that. As we know, there were some teachers that are in there that didn't quite think that was a fair thing. What's your thoughts, I guess, if we can get into the world of our educators?
Yeah. So on LEARNS, I think there are two key components that came out of that legislation. One was that bar to move up to 50,000 across the state. And again, if you look back, Governor Hutchinson also made steps in that direction, but Sarah Sanders took it to another level, and you all did as legislators to put it to 50,000. Huge level of support, especially for small districts. So that's really fantastic. The Bentonvilles, where I was at as a superintendent, it really hasn't impacted them one bit. They didn't get $1 from it, and they continue to have ranges of salaries that are higher. The other thing that happened as a part of the LEARNS Act was an accountability form that really created a little bit, an easier mechanism in order, if you have a teacher that's being ineffective, to non-renew their contract. And so I also think that's positive. If a person's not doing what's necessary and is not doing the things that should be coming towards kids, teaching at a certain level, then they need to, obviously you try to retrain and help and support them. But if those things fail, then they need to be looking at maybe a different profession, just like the rest of the world. I think that the thing that where we're at right now is we've got to find this kind of fits into a bigger topic that ties into access too, of what's post-secondary look like, and, how do we get people prepared? And, one of the things is we've got to make education more attractive in our state so that young people gravitate towards it. We've developed those programs in Bentonville. We developed in Little Rock. There are some really cool things happening at higher ed right now where they're actually giving kids almost like additional scholarship money to go into the field of education. University of Arkansas Little Rock was a big proponent of that and helped set some of those things up with Little Rock and Jacksonville school district. We need more of those type of things. Of course, the other thing is that we're going to continue to have to create a competitive wage. So I just completed a superintendent search in your district, Russellville, but we also just completed a superintendent search district up in Osceola. So here's a high school senior. If a high school senior leaves that high school in Osceola right now, can go towards those steel plants, they can be making minimum of $75,000, and some of the kids that have got some skills through their trade school are at $125,000. So, the competitive end of this thing that's a challenge, right? To then think, okay, what's in it for me to be a public school educator? So we need to really highlight, honor, recognize every chance we get to celebrate teachers, to make it a profession that people want to gravitate towards. And then we're also going to have to continue to figure out how to enhance wages.
Mike, I'm curious if you got a view on this. I remember when Governor Huckabee, this is 20 years ago, really tried to make a difference in education. And I think he was trying to consolidate the school districts on the premise. He had I think two main arguments. One is, I believe, and I may have this wrong, that Arkansas has more school districts than a lot of other big states that have a lot more students. But the second thing he would make, and I thought this was a fairly powerful argument, which was, gee whiz, if your kid can catch a pass, we got plenty of people to support you at every single high school in Arkansas. But if they're really good at the trombone or chemistry or calculus, not the case. And he would give statistics about how many new teachers entering broadly across the state would have a chemistry degree or, a math degree. And I had this sense that it didn't really impact schools like Bentonville, Russellville, but, maybe Osceola, maybe, Hector, places that are really small. Do you have a perspective on the type of teachers, and it gets back to what you were saying before, that we could attract that have the right sort of credentials that would be maybe best situated to teach young people?
You're hitting a real issue for a lot of folks in our state that are running school districts, and I believe even in some of the private schools have challenges in this and charters. And that is that, hard to find positions would include people that want to go work in special education.
Yeah.
So that's a hard to fill position. Science, mathematics, both typically harder to fill type positions. And I do think we need to get more creative on those types of positions, offer some additional incentives to get people to consider going towards those things. Many times what we found when we've done kind of like a review of staffing is that, and this was especially true in Little Rock, that they may have had the science and math, but they went and chose to be in a PE field, or they chose to go do social studies because they had a dual major, if that makes sense. And so, how can we get people back to saying, okay, I need to really go into science or math or SPED? And incentives, I think, would be a good way to do that. But then there's also the whole thing of trying to help people in career changes to go towards districts as well. Because, again, this is a really good field. I mean, education is a great field to be in. It's going to have to make it more attractive.
Matt, what else from kind of the State House perspective?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to get into this. Mike, I know you're the president of the Board for Economics Arkansas, correct?
Correct.
And so, one conversation I had with Representative Bruce Cozart in the House, we were talking about such courses back in the day when I had, home economics and things of that nature. So I guess maybe, one thing I don't know all the details about is Bruce told me there are courses now that are required that essentially help students learn how to manage money once they're graduated out. I guess, can you tell us a little bit about that? Because back in the day, I had home ec, which was an elective, and we learned how to sew, and Mike, I was no good at that. But we learned how to bake a cake. I remember that, and I was okay at that. But then we learned how to balance a checkbook and what credit cards are, what they do. I guess I'm just kind of curious, what are schools teaching students now in regards to how to manage their income as they proceed?
Well, first, I will go ahead and take the opportunity, Matt, to plug Economics Arkansas, because I am a board member and have served in a couple different roles there. And I initially got involved in it because Jim Walton asked me out to lunch one day, and he says, "Hey, Mike, I'd like you to be a part of Economics Arkansas." And I said, "Well, if you're asking, I'm saying yes." I mean, that was a pretty easy thing to do. But the reality is that financial literacy is so critical. And Economics Arkansas is a big people. They provide free professional development and all sorts of activities. There are classes now at the high school level that are required that have kids actually learning some of these things. But I think we can go deeper. So when you think about, especially the access package that just got approved, it really is trying to create, these pathways of opportunity for young people. And whether it's in medical, whether it's somebody wants to be an attorney, somebody wants to be in law enforcement, somebody wants to get in construction, each one of those pathway courses, we really, and I'll tie this back to public education, private, whatever you want to do, we should be teaching financial literacy components within each one of those pathway type courses. Because that's what I think was missing when I grew up. We didn't talk about those things. My own children, I did a pitiful job as a parent, and my kids are all in their 30s. And that's a really screwed up generation because of adults like me not helping their kids and the schools not helping their kids. So we can do so much more. And I really think the opportunity with Access right now, that if we were diligent about adding financial literacy components, let me take it one step further, though. In Little Rock, and we also did this down in Magnolia, Springdale has done it, is that we're teaching financial literacy concepts even at the elementary level. And that's, again, foundational stuff. Just like we said with literacy for reading, literacy for finances can happen at a very early age. And we can do so many cool things with young people at that age, tie it into reading, tie it into the business community coming in, being a part of it. And I'm really proud of some of the things we've done in Little Rock in that area.
Would there be other things you would change from a curriculum perspective? Because and this is maybe a little higher ed, but I'd like to talk about it through K through 12. When I look at your typical college course, and you go in as a freshman and you take calculus, and I think, you know what, I mean, there's nothing wrong with calculus, right? But my Lord, financial literacy and understanding a balance sheet is how the world works. I think, knowing a little bit more of a foreign language, understanding certain basics around computers, which are everywhere, and robotics and things that are going to continue to increase. Are there things that you would say, look, we need to change the curriculum to keep up with the times, and we need to be willing to make those adjustments, and they shouldn't be a sacrosanct, from, what we learned 40 years ago? Do you have a view on any of that?
I do, and I think that some of the best teachers from when we all grew up to the best teachers that are in the field right now, they in classes like that some people, they hear the word algebra and they're like, oh God, I can't do math.
Right.
And the great teacher makes that learning relevant. And I think that's the difference in terms of what needs to happen. And relevant also means more hands-on. It means to utilize some of the skill sets that you're picking up in that algebra class, in that high-level science class, so that you're actually doing things that have a direct impact. And that could be, there's kids doing, some of our top kids are already doing these things of developing apps that help. I just read about a Bentonville West group of kids that developed an app that detects cancer early. And
wow.
It's unbelievable, so there's things that we can do to engage kids in a different way. And I think that's really the magic sauce on the higher level courses that you're talking about. And it's got to have real relevant things. The Waltons just announced last week a new university, right? Okay.
Right.
Well, they're changing the way things are going to be done. And is my guess, you're going to end up seeing a whole different level of what technology can bring. And I'm hoping that those things will match down into the K-12 and really kind of shake some things up.
One more, and then I'll throw it to Matt. I'm curious, we're in a world right now where we're, with Doge and other things going on, let's just call it a lot of change and a lot of looking at the sort of the tyranny of the status quo and saying, what should we change about what we're doing? I have this perception, and I haven't lived it firsthand, so I could be wrong on this, but I have this perception that teachers are overwhelmed with paperwork that the system requires them to create, whether it's planning, I just picture this overwhelming amount of paperwork that then creates a more of an administrative apparatus behind it. Am I wrong?
Well, I think there are probably certain systems, certain school districts that may be a little bit top heavy in that. I think sometimes we overtest, and that creates a little bit of a burden for teachers. I still believe in assessment. I still believe in assessments during the course of the year to monitor and make sure you're on track. And if something's not happening, you can make adjustments immediately. But I do think we sometimes over assess, and those things can cause teachers some fits. I think that that's probably SPED is the other area where, that's what kills some of those folks is they get overwhelmed by the paperwork. And of course, that's at the federal level. And I'm sure in some ways, maybe there's a little bit of thinking even in terms of how President Trump is viewing some of those things. That is why he's wanting to change some of the Department of Education.
Yeah, I just don't know. I just have this perception that if I'm a teacher, I'm teaching math, that I also have these other things in addition to teaching children and grading papers that I have to do that are part of, maybe it's part of assessment. Maybe it's part of a continuing education. Maybe it's just things that I've got to fill out because that's the way the system works. And I'm just curious if that's I can speak from a business perspective and say, you could tell me I can fill out one more form and say, it's not a big deal. It's one form. But I would say, good Lord, I need to fill out another form, and I'm just, so it sounds like from your perspective, not overburdened with paperwork.
Not in my lens. No.
Okay. Matt, what else?
Yeah. Well, Mike, I guess jump tracks a little bit now. Talk a little bit about school safety. That's on the top of parents' minds. we've got some data here. It says 40 schools were labeled as, quote, persistently unsafe for the 2023-2024 year. And I know you're involved in a crisis alert system. I guess my first question would be, what makes a school consist or persistently unsafe? And I guess that'd be my first question. And then my second one, if you talk a little bit about your crisis alert systems and your involvement in that.
Well, first off, that's good homework. I didn't know you realize that I've worked on that crisis alert, and we did have a piece of legislation that I hope comes back again in the future to create a crisis alert badge that would really empowers educators and classified certified to be able to ask for help, whether it's somebody that fell over with a heart attack or a fight ready to break out, or those terrible crises or tornadoes. So it does all those things. And so Centegix is a really good company. And the incident that happened in Georgia at the start of the school year, brand new superintendent just came into the district. He had the Centegix system in his old district. He implemented it that summer, said, I don't care. I don't need to be collaborative. I'm going to make sure our kids are safe. He implemented it 1 week after school started. 4 kids were shot, or 2 kids shot, 2 staff members shot. All 4 died. But the outcome would have been probably quadruple that easily if the Centegix system hadn't been in place. Centegix is just one part of the solution. And again, Governor Sanders has come up with several different things that have really enhanced safety in our state. She has brought forward additional grant money in 2 different times just in the last 2 years to enhance safety. I would be disappointed if I was in a community where I was one of those 40 schools. Typically what I find is those are schools that just really are tight on money and finance. A lot of times they lack some very simple things. Cameras, obviously, are a really good thing. A system to be able to communicate between administrators is critical. And then the final thing that is kind of makes sense to me is 2 more things: is being able to come in and out of access control type doors so that you can control who's coming in and out of your building. And then even like a safe space when you come into a building, like you think about the elementaries in Russellville, or some of you are watching in Fort Smith or Rogers, Arkansas. Almost all those schools, you come in, you press a button, the door opens up, but then you're in a space, you're still not in the building. And you're able to talk to an individual in this cubicle, more or less, that allows then whether or not they're going to have you come into the building all the way. Those are simple safety things that have to be done. I really appreciate that the governor has moved forward on these things. There's still some work to be done, but as a state, we should be pretty proud of where we're at. We're doing some good things. Well,
if you could, back on your crisis alert system. So has that been implemented in the state of Arkansas yet or not?
We have, it's not as a state system yet. And for some reason, it did not move forward on legislation. It's actually a part of a package called Alyssa's Law, which came out of the Parkland shooting in Florida, where the parent just really has pushed this to say, we've got to do better. We've got to have a way to access and make sure that people know precisely where to go should a horrific event occur. So this crisis alert system with Centegix that I help represent, it actually lets you know the precise spot, whether it's 3 or 4 floors, whether it's out on the playground. It lets you know the exact place to go, and it will notify law enforcement officers. In this state, we have a whole host of districts that have moved towards it. Some districts that you would be aware of is Little Rock, obviously. We put it in right as I was leaving. We have Fayetteville that just came on, Jacksonville that just came on. We have districts that are small that have added this to like Blytheville, to medium-sized districts. So there's probably about 20 school districts that have actually implemented this. And then there's a good 20 that are in consideration right now. But again, taking stock, we have over 200 districts, almost 250 districts. So we have some work to do.
Mike, I'm curious. So if it's persistently unsafe, as far as you understand this, is that more like an audit? Like someone said, did they have this safe space? Did they have this communication? And no, they must be unsafe. Or is it unsafe because there was actually things that happen like violence or fights or things that score them that are not that they lack something, but because something's occurred?
It's my understanding it's kind of a combination of those.
Okay.
So I do think that there's they have different expectations to be able to get through a tier one. Tier one is the very basic elements that you need to have for safety. Then you can work on tier two and then tier three. Some districts haven't got out of that tier one, and so that's a problem. And then there are instances where there have been some things that just unsafe acts within the schools.
Okay. I'm curious, what do you think about technology? Thinks that the kids should have cell phones in school, not have cell phones? And how do you think about how we should handle AI within our classroom structures, given the what we all think is going to happen?
Yeah, a couple of examples. First off, I was really probably one of those people that have always advocated for cell phones in the school because I thought it was a tool that kids could use, and all these kids have cell phones.
They all do.
But
yep.
The problem is that, we just don't have enough structured things to make them meaningful. Some really good teachers did use cell phones in a very productive way, but it also had so many negative consequences. So if I had a poll, I would say it's 95% of the educators in the state are grateful for Governor Sanders and the legislators for taking the action to go ahead and say there is now not going to be cell phones on campus, or they'll be put into the bags and so forth. So a majority of people like it. I was in Jonesboro this fall, and they enacted it proactively. And we met with a group of kids, 30 kids at the high school level, and we asked them about it. Their one gripe was, why were we not included at least in the conversation? If it's our school, our life, why couldn't we have been included, at least to give our perspective? But the end result was dramatically better than I ever imagined. They were saying, we're actually talking to each other. We're communicating. We're using our cell phones less. Even when we're away from campus, we're using them less. So there's some really good positive things, and there's less bullying and demeaning taking place. So the kids actually found value in this. But again, why not go to the kids and talk to them? That can be a recipe for a lot of things that we need to do, is go towards kids and ask them about, even back to your question about math class and how can we make it better? What would make it more interesting? Kids have some really cool perspectives.
Yeah. Matt, you like this because the cell phone bill just was this last session, or was the session before? Did that get a lot of support? I assume it got a lot of support at the State House.
It did, but Mike, you brought up a point, and I will say this on the just on the service end at the front. I had the mindset of, well, cell phones in schools are a good thing. Teach kids how to use them. We've got them every day. I mean, heck, I've, got mine here. I'm sure you guys have yours close by. And so again, I was elected to represent the will of the people. So I always say it's not about what Matt always thinks or wants. It's what the people want. And so as I started looking more and more at it, Mike, and to your point, anyway, long story short, I ended up voting for it, and it was overwhelmingly very, very popular, Andy. It was very had bipartisan support. I found that interesting. But anyway, I believe once the dust is settled, it's a good thing. And Mike, it's neat to hear those comments from the students that they see that, because I think we would all agree we all need to look at our phones less than we do. So I find that interesting. But yeah, I think it was overwhelmingly supported, and I think now that the dust is starting to settle, I think that people see it as a good decision and a good law that was passed for sure.
Yeah, well, hopefully there'll be some balance, because I could just to go counter for a second, I would look at it and say, well, what if you needed to be communication with your job? Or, like a sick parent, or like I could just dream up a whole host of things which you would say, this is the primary way that people communicate with each other. And to take that away means you're going to be out of the loop with those things. I will admit that I think they're addictive.
Parents, really, that kind of was another thought in my head, is there are so many parents that appreciate being able to know exactly where their kid is, where they're at during the day, be able to contact them. And so I thought that would be a little bit of a barrier, but so far, talking to my colleagues, it hasn't. It also, I'll put one last plug in on Centegix. This is another positive thing about Centegix is now you've blanketed your campus to say, guess what? We're going to take care of your baby. Okay, it doesn't matter whether they're a high school kid or a fourth grader. If something goes wrong, something goes down that campus, we're going to have the right support for your child, whether it's right there on the campus or bringing in police, fire, whatever needs to happen.
I've got one last question, Matt, unless you've got you want to ask one before I ask this, my last one. And I'm interested.
No, Andy. I think Mike's done a great job. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, Mike, okay, we've made some progress. I know you've said good things about Governor Sanders and Governor Hutchinson when they were here and some of the things that they promoted. How big is the gap between where we sit today and whoever's number one, who I have no idea who that is, and what are the things that we should be doing over the next decade to kind of go from 38, let's see, you came in at 11, you said we were 48. So in 15 years ish, we moved up 10 spots. I'd like to think that we can move up more than 10 spots in the next 15 years. What are do you have a formula or things that you just believe that we should focus on?
Well, you look first off at the state that typically gets ranked number one. It's Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Over and over and over. And, the thing that I would say is that, one, we have to stay the course on this literacy thing. You can't let that go. And I don't see Governor Sanders or Secretary Leva backing off of that 1 inch. So I'm confident there. The second thing that we've got to do is that we've got to have, I think, enhanced partnerships with the business community into the school systems. And again, that fits back into that early childhood education model. We really want to go move in a state that has more people that have hard economic realities. Then we need to do more in early childhood education. At the same end, we need a greater connection at the business level at the high school. There are some districts that are just knocking it off the chart with outstanding career tech type programs. Bentonville and Little Rock, I'm very proud of what's happened there. But Springdale, Pea Ridge, Siloam Springs, Fort Smith, Jonesboro, Russellville has a really good career tech thing going. But we're not even close to being able to really do that across the board. And that's I think the magic sauce, especially at the secondary level, is getting business community, making more real, relevant learning opportunities available for kids in all these variety of classes. And we're just going to have to work on that investment. The last thing that I would tell you is that, that sometimes it's the simple things that we do that make a difference. And so one of the things that Matt and his colleagues and the governor did was created free breakfast and lunch program. It's a big, big deal. Okay. Big deal in terms of getting kids fed appropriately. You look at, school-based clinics that we've developed. There's been one that's going into Russellville. There's ones in Fort Smith. There's ones in Springdale, Little Rock. Those school-based health clinics are game changers. But again, we need greater access to some of those type of things. So some of these other things that impact learning, we also need to pay attention to, because those things really make a difference in terms of the health and well-being of a young person.
All right. We'll leave it there. Matt, you want to close us down?
Yeah, sure, Mike. Thank you so much for coming on. Education's a huge, huge topic. We could spend hours upon hours, but thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come on. Really enjoyed you today.
Well, I hope maybe we can regroup again at another stage and evaluate this, because I have a feeling Andy's going to come back to me on this thing on, okay, we're 38. Now we're at, we went to 39 or we went to 35. And how come we can't go faster? And
well, I'm obsessed with it. I look at it and say, why not us? Right. Because, I bet if we were to make a wager, let's just say whoever's 30, right huddled around us between 30 and 40, I bet one of those states, 10 years from now makes a big advancements, right? And we could probably look back if we had hindsight, if we were in the future, we'd look back and go, they made that decision really well, that decision really well, and those things propelled them forward. And, we got a lot of issues to deal with. So really appreciate your thoughts and your time. Of course, anybody listening, please comment on any of the social media channels at freearkansas.com. And with that, we'll wish you a great day.
Thanks, everyone.